Welcome back to the Tax Facts channel. This is part 2 of the Earned Income Tax Credit. This is talking rules if you have a qualifying child, rules 8 through 10. If you have not seen part 1, I suggest going back and watching that video first. That's rules 1 through 7, rules for everyone. In this one here, again, we're discussing rules if you have a qualifying child. Chapter 2, rules if you have a qualifying child. So we're going to discuss Rule 8, your child must meet the relationship, age, residency, and joint return tests. Rule 9, your qualifying child cannot be used by more than one person to claim the Earned Income Credit. And Rule 10, you cannot be a qualifying child of another taxpayer. So your child is a qualifying child if your child meets 4 tests. The 4 tests are relationship, age, residency, and joint return. And we're going to get into each one of these in detail to make sure you understand this. So the relationship test. To be your qualifying child, a child must be your son, daughter, stepchild, foster child, or a descendant of any of them, or must be your brother, sister, half-brother, half-sister, step-brother or sister, or a descendant of any of them. So for adopted child and foster child, an adopted child is always treated as your own child. The term adopted child includes a child who was lawfully placed with you for legal adoption. And for a foster child, for the Earned Income Credit, a person is your foster child if the child is placed with you by an authorized placement agency or by judgment, decree, or other order of any court of competent jurisdiction. Now for the age test, your child must fall under one of these 3 categories. 1, they must be under age 19 at the end of 2022 and be younger than you. Unless you're filing jointly, they must be younger than you or your spouse. They must be under age 24 at the end of the year and be a student and younger than you. And again, if you're filing jointly, they must be younger than you or your spouse. And lastly, if they are permanently and totally disabled at the end of 2022, regardless of any age. Now I want to give you some examples. So for this first example, this is for if your child is not under age 19. So let's say your son turned 19 on December 15th. Unless he was permanently and totally disabled or a student, he is not a qualifying child because at the end of the year, he was not under the age of 19. Now let's say for your child is not younger than you or your spouse. Let's say you have a 23-year-old brother who is a full-time student and unmarried, lives with you and your spouse. He is not disabled. Both you and your spouse are 21 years old, and you file a joint return. Your brother is not your qualifying child because he is not younger than you or your spouse. So if we look at the same facts as example 2, except that your spouse is age 25. Because your brother is younger than your spouse, he does qualify as a qualifying child even though he is not younger than you. And let's talk about a student. What qualifies as a student? To qualify as a student, your child must be during some part of each of any 5 calendar months during the calendar year, was either a full-time student at a school that has a regular teaching staff, course of study, and regular student body at the school, or the student is taking full-time on-farm training course given by a school described in the first bullet point, or a state, county, or local government. The 5 calendar months need not be consecutive. A full-time student is a student who is enrolled for the number of hours or courses the school considers to be full-time attendance. Next, we have the residency test. Your child must have lived with you in the United States for more than half of the year of 2022. Now, I just want you to be aware of this. You cannot claim the earned income credit for a child who did not live with you for more than half of the year, even if you paid most of the child's living expenses. The IRS may ask you for documents to show that you lived with each qualifying child. The documents you might want to keep for this purpose include school and child care records and other records that show your child's address. Last, we have the joint return test. To meet this test, the child cannot file a joint return for the year. But there is an exception to the joint return test that applies if your child and his or her spouse file a joint return only to claim a refund of income tax withheld or estimated tax paid. So let me give you some examples. The example here is a child files a joint return to get a refund of tax withheld. Your 18-year-old son and his 17-year-old wife had $900 of wages from part-time jobs and no other income. They don't have a child, and neither is required to file a tax return. Taxes were taken out of their pay, so they file a joint return only to get the refund of the withheld taxes. The exception to the joint return test applies, so your son may be your qualifying child if all other tests are met. So let's move on to Rule 9 now. Your qualifying child cannot be used by more than one person to claim the earned income tax credit. Now, there's sometimes a child meets the test to be a qualifying child of more than one person. However, only one of these persons can actually treat the child as a qualifying child. Only that person can use the child as a qualifying child to take all of the following tax benefits, provided the person is eligible for each benefit. So they're able to claim that child for the non-refundable child tax credit, a credit for other dependents, refundable child tax credit, or additional child tax credit. They can also claim head of household filing status. They can claim the credit for child and dependent care expenses, the exclusion for dependent care benefits, and the earned income tax credit. The other person cannot take any of these benefits based on this qualifying child. In other words, you and the other person can't agree to divide these tax benefits between you. The other person can't take any of these tax benefits unless he or she has a different qualifying child. Now, there is the tiebreaker rule. The tiebreaker rule explains who, if anyone, can claim the earned income credit when more than one person has the same qualifying child. However, the tiebreaker rules do not apply if the other person is your spouse and you file a joint return. The last rule we're going to discuss is Rule 10. You cannot be a qualifying child of another taxpayer. So you are a qualifying child of another taxpayer if all of the following statements are true. 1. You are that person's son, daughter, stepchild or daughter, foster child, or a descendant of any of those. Or you are that person's brother, sister, half-brother or sister, step-brother or sister, or a descendant of any of them. Let me give you an example here. You and your daughter lived with your mother all year. You are 22 years old, unmarried, and attended a trade school full-time. You had a part-time job and earned $5,700. You had no other income because you meet the relationship, age, residency, and joint return test. You are a qualifying child of your mother. She can claim the earned income credit if she meets all the other requirements. Because you are your mother's qualifying child, you cannot claim the earned income credit. This is so even if your mother can't or doesn't claim the earned income credit. Number 2, you were under age 19 at the end of the year and younger than that person or that person's spouse if they filed jointly. You were under age 24 at the end of the year, a student, and younger than that person or that person's spouse if filed jointly. Or you were permanently and totally disabled regardless of any age. Number 3, you lived with that person in the United States for more than half the year. And lastly, number 4, you aren't filing a joint return for the year, or you're filing a joint return only to claim a refund of withheld income tax or estimated taxes paid. I just want to make a note. If you are a qualifying child of another taxpayer, you cannot claim the earned income credit. This is true even if the person for whom you are a qualifying child for does not claim the earned income credit or meet all of the rules to claim the earned income credit. Okay guys, this concludes part 2 of the earned income tax credit. Like I mentioned in part 1, all this information is directly from the IRS publication 596. I also posted a link below with a lot of information. Make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you get the notification of part 3 and 4 that'll be coming out shortly. So keep your eye out for that. And please like, subscribe, and share these videos. My whole purpose of doing these videos is to get this information out to people. I just want to educate everyone about taxes here, about individual federal income tax. Not trying to create tax attorneys out of anybody. I just generally want to educate others on this topic here. I know taxes can be very complex and complicated. They change year to year, and I just want to keep everybody up to date on as much as I can. Okay, so you can check me out on Instagram as well, Tax Facts in a Nutshell. I post short 1-minute videos on just the highlights of credits, deductions, or even just a specific topic regarding the taxes. Alright, be on the lookout for that next video. Hope you guys tune in soon.